Hello, YouTube. Fairlight here, and wow, it's been a long time since I've uploaded a video. I will tell you where I've been, give you a little recap, but for those of you that aren't interested in hearing this bit of intro, you can skip ahead to the next section where the guide actually begins. Now, for those of you who've been curious, I've still been live streaming basically every day for the past several years, but the interaction with the live audience was always my favorite part of being a streamer, and I don't really get that when I make YouTube videos, so making YouTube videos was somewhat of a low priority for me in the past. My heart just wasn't in it. I am now making an active effort to bring it back, though, because Twitch has updated their guidelines and doesn't allow us to keep hundreds of hours of video stored on Twitch anymore, so I have to find a different place to store it. That means I have to move my videos over to YouTube if I want to keep them long term, so you can expect that I will be periodically uploading on here once again. I'm sorry I kept you waiting so long. I'm not a very good video editor, if I'm being honest. It takes me a long time to make anything, so I just kind of stopped. All right, now let's get into the actual deck building. When you first open up the arsenal, you've got two different pages to look at. You have your army builder and the armory itself. Army builder is where you're going to go to customize your units and your army deck, but the armory lets you compare stuff side by side between both factions and also shows you which specialty each unit comes from, which I found to be very handy when I was starting the game, because I didn't always know which specialties offered which units. So you can compare the rosters here, and then you can also go compare them to their Russian equivalents or vice versa, or you can look at all of the above together, categorized, and make your judgments that way. So you might see a unit in here you think, oh, that's really cool, I want to make an army and incorporate that, and then you can see which specialty you need to do to get it. So now let's look at the actual army builder. When you go to the army builder and you want to make a new battle group, the first thing you're going to have to decide is which of your two specializations you're going to go for, and of course which country. I'm going to use the US for this demonstration video because, you know, the names are easier to pronounce and people are going to be more familiar with it. I'm not going to cover exactly which units are best or what is the meta or how to make the most powerful deck or anything like that. I'm instead going to show you the logic you can use to make sure you cover all your bases so that you don't go into a fight and think, man, I just don't have anything in my deck to deal with this. I want to show you how to make something that's versatile and applies to basically every situation. A different video on later on down the line can probably cover, you know, more meta picks and what is the strongest, but I want to make sure we get all of our info together before we do that. Talk to higher elo players, and also just play the game more myself before I go trying to give out high-end strategy advice. So today we're going to focus on basics instead. Now, when you first choose your nation, you then get to pick two specialties. Now, obviously, each specialization has its whole own separate roster, and that is important. Not every unit is available to you when you do this. You're only going to get 2 out of 5. However, there is a lot of redundancy between the groups. So, like, basically every group has some sort of a supply truck. Every group has some sort of anti-air vehicle or infantry. So it's not like you're going to find yourself completely lacking options, but the exact ones available to you will change. Another important factor to consider, though, that I think a lot of people overlook is the budget. The budget is actually kind of important. Each specialization comes with its own built-in budget, and you are combining two specializations, so they will be added together. We can look at the Armored Brigade, for example, and see that they have a decent budget for Recon and Infantry, and of course they have a large budget for vehicles and support, which is their strong suit. But if you look down here, you see they actually bring nothing in terms of helicopters or aircraft. If you were to pick the Armored Brigade and then say Striker Cavalry, who also doesn't bother with helicopters, you end up with 0 in the helicopter budget. I don't recommend doing this unless you are a veteran of the game. If you've already got a lot of hours played, if you figured out a strategy that you really like, this can work, not just with helicopters, but with any category. You can also end up with, I think, 0 vehicle budget if you take... Where is it? No, not 0 vehicle budget. There's a few different combinations you can do to end up with 0 budget in various categories. I don't suggest that. I think it's good to have all of your bases covered when you're new. Later on, if you come up with a strategy that you particularly like and you think, yeah, you know what, I don't really need choppers, I don't really need vehicles, I don't really need support, whatever, then go for it. But when you're new and learning, I think it's a great idea to have everything, which is also why I highly recommend both the USMC and the Airborne, because both of these specialties offer a little bit of budget in basically every category. And if you combine them, you get a pretty healthy amount to spend across everything. You can also look at, say, the Armored Brigade. Since the Armored Brigade has nothing in helicopters or aircraft, you can fix that by picking a specialty to go with it that has a high value in helicopters and aircraft, such as the Special Operations Force, which has 1,250 to spend in helicopters and aircraft. So you combine these two, and now your weakness is covered. So that is kind of an important philosophy to keep in mind, is making sure you don't gimp yourself by leaving yourself no room in the budget for an important category. In my opinion, the most important thing to keep a healthy budget for is the support category, because the support category covers a lot of different things. It covers long-range anti-air, short-range anti-air, missile defense, supply trucks, long-range artillery, mortars. There's a ton of stuff that goes into the support category, so I like having a nice healthy budget there. I find it hard to play the game without it, so that would be the one that I would recommend you get at least 1,500 or higher, but I wouldn't complain at 2,000 budget either. So once you find the two specializations that you want to roll with, you can move forward, and then we can work on actually building the deck. Now, I just recommended the USMC and the Airborne, not necessarily together. I just mean that you can take USMC and combine it with pretty much anything else in the game, and you're still going to have a decent budget spread across the board. Likewise, the Airborne can combine with just about anything, and you have all of your bases covered. It's a little iffy with Spec Ops because your vehicle and support budgets are tiny, so maybe not that one, but I'm going to go ahead and do Marines and Airborne for this video. We'll just go ahead and start a new deck entirely. Now, when you get into a new deck, each category has certain goals that you want to fulfill, certain boxes you need to check, and I'm going to go over each of them here to help cover everything. First, let's go over Recon. We'll just do them in order. When you first look at Recon, the number one thing that I like to check is our Stealth Recon versus our Assault Recon or Combat Recon or whatever you want to call it. The game doesn't ever actually really use these terms. I've just kind of made them up for categorization in my own head, so I'll explain real quick. Some of your Recon infantry are going to have a stealth score of 3. This is as high as your stealth score goes. The stealth score is a divider of the vision score. So if you have an enemy with 3,000 vision, when they're trying to spot this guy, they actually only have 1,000 vision. That's how the math behind it works. So a 3 on your stealth is fantastic. These would be what I would call stealth recon. You also have guys with a 2.5, which is not quite as good. Also, their vision range is not as long. You'll see the airborne snipers have longer vision, whereas force recon is a little bit shorter, but it's still longer than most regular units. The main difference here between a stealth recon versus like an assault recon is simply that there are more of these guys in the group, and they have more guns and more tools to fight if they get stuck in a fight. Ideally, you never want these guys in a fight. Your recon category is primarily just there to observe and watch what the enemy is doing, and occasionally maybe take pot shots if an opportunity presents itself, but you really don't want to give away your position with these guys. If these guys get caught, they're usually just dead. So it's a good idea to tell them to hold their fire as soon as they get to the battlefield. And I like to go ahead and grab a couple of these guys right off the bat. The best thing you can do with them is get them on the flanks or deep in the enemy backline, somewhere out of harm's way where they can post up in a building and just observe. If you can get between the enemy spawn and the objectives, that's a fantastic spot, because then you can watch all of their vehicles as they come out of their spawn, and you get an idea what the enemy is calling in. Anywhere that you see the enemy trying to set up a supply depot, if you can get a recon unit in nearby, you can watch as they're trying to refuel and repair, and then bombard them with artillery or airstrikes and just keep interrupting their operations. So that's the main goal of the whole recon group, is to facilitate that. With a group that has more men and shorter vision range, these guys you probably want to deploy a little closer to the action, but still not really on the front line. But since these guys can handle themselves a little bit better, I like putting these assault recon type guys a little up close. Now, you've also got drones is another category. I think drones are a fantastic tool. They're usually pretty affordable. Some of them can mount weapons on them, and they're a really good bang for your buck aerial recon tool with insane vision range and I absolutely love bringing these when I have them available. But depending on which two specialties you chose, you might not have any drones to work with, unfortunately. But if you do have the option, I recommend absolutely grabbing them. Quick and light recon vehicles are also handy to have, something like a Humvee. There's a bunch of them here. I would probably prefer to take this one simply because you can see it has a laser designator on it. It's also airdroppable if you intend to do, jumping out of a plane with a car. That's always fun, but since it's a recon vehicle, I want the laser designator. I usually only take one or two of these cheap little light recon vehicles, mainly because I feel like recon infantry is more effective at staying hidden. You'll notice that a recon Humvee does not have a great stealth score, 1.25. This thing will get spotted, so you have to keep it pretty far back. It can't sneak behind enemy lines as effectively as your actual recon troops. And that's about it. Make sure you also give them a ride. Let's talk troop transports for a second. Troop transports, when I first started playing the game, if I picked 4 airborne snipers, I would grab 4 Humvees. Don't do this. That was a noob mistake. Don't make this error. You don't need that many vehicles to transport your guys in. First off, they are all shared, right? So these airborne snipers, although they are paired with the Humvee, you can actually deploy them in this Humvee instead. The Humvee M240 and the Humvee GMV. These are 2 different vehicles, but all of your troop transports are shared between your recon. They're also shared across categories down here to your infantry. So if you have, say, a squad of Marine Raiders riding in their AAVP, this personnel carrier, you could actually, if you wanted to, deploy your recon troops in that personnel carrier, right? So keep in mind that all of your transport options are shared. Therefore, there's no reason for any one particular group to have a whole bunch of these transports. You're going to have tons of transports available. I would just try to grab a couple of fast ones and a couple of tanky ones. The most important stat for transports to look at really is how many people can fit in the vehicle. Your airborne sniper team is a squad of 3. So with this Humvee, it only seats 4, so you can only fit 1 group in there. But if you were to bring along the ISV, this thing seats 8, so we could slot that in instead. Now, with 8 seats, you can actually deploy 2 squads of airborne snipers in a single ISV for only $10 more. That's pretty affordable. You can also go down here and customize their loadouts, but I'm not going to get too into detail on every unit, or this video will end up being hours long if I try to go over every unit and all of their loadouts. So we're just covering the basics for now. So that'll do it for recon. Let's go look at infantry. For infantry, the bases that I like to cover are, you need to have a mainline infantry unit, which is just your frontline, down and dirty rifleman type unit. I also like to have an elite unit. So if you have an infantry unit that stands head and shoulders above the rest, in this case, the Marine Raiders are absolutely an elite unit that can go in and clean house. These guys are just walking death. When they get into a building, anybody else that's in that building is going bye-bye. They take care of business. You may not always have an elite infantry available, but you can check and see. It doesn't say elite anywhere on the screen. Again, these are just kind of terms that I've come to throw around when I'm playing with my friends. But look for really high damage numbers, like 2.5 damage. Times 8 is a lot of damage. The Marine Raiders is a 14-man squad with 70 health. They're very hard to kill. So this would be an example. You can also tell by the price tag and how many it allows you to bring. It only lets you bring 2 of these guys, and they're very expensive. So that should just tell you right off the bat, hey, these are probably really strong. So I like to grab, two really strong infantry that I can count on to send into a building and know that they're going to win the fight with basically whoever's in that building. They're going to kill whoever's in there. No questions asked. And if they have a vehicle that's worth upgrading, go for it. You can slap upgrades on there. I like this one because it has a grenade launcher and a heavy machine gun, and you can upgrade the armor package. The armor stats on it still aren't going to withstand tank shells or anti-tank rockets, though, so you still have to be careful with it. Beyond the elite infantry, you've also got regular mainline infantry to consider. And here we actually have 2 different options because we are working with the airborne and the Marines. We have airborne next-gen weapon system, or we just have the Marines. So you can compare them side by side. If you look at the stats over here, also you can click this little toggle button to change info panels. If you didn't know that, you can look at the in-depth weapon stats and such. When I'm comparing infantry, I like to look at how much damage they do with their regular shots, how much damage they do with their rocket launchers. Whether the rockets can target infantry or not is kind of a big deal. This rocket, you can see, targets vehicles and helicopters, but it doesn't target other infantry. So if they got into a fight with a unit that had an anti-infantry rocket, they'd probably be defeated quickly. So that's something to keep in mind. Between these two, it's largely a matter of preference. I'm going to say we're going to go ahead with the Marines just because it's a bigger squad size, and we've already got armored personnel carriers we can rely on. So we'll just keep the Marines here for now and stack a few of these in here. You don't need to go overboard bringing loads and loads of infantry, and we still got a few other bases to cover. So there, I've got my elite. I've got a standard infantry unit. Now let's look at what else we have. The other things, the main roles to cover, besides your basic infantry and an elite infantry if you have it available, is an anti-air and an anti-tank. These are just the two most basic things to look at. So as we scroll down here and look, we actually have the Stinger team for the airborne, which is an anti-air. And I don't believe the Marines actually have an anti-air infantry squad. So just by default, I'm grabbing these guys, and I'm going to grab a bunch of them. And maybe give them 1 or 2 Humvees. Again, since they share transports with the others, we don't need to go overboard on transport. There's only 4 guys in a Stinger team. So if I give them an ISV with 8 seats, again, I can deploy 2 Stinger teams in 1 vehicle and save time. Now for an anti-tank squad, we actually have multiple options here. We have the airborne weapons team. We have a tow team. We have the Marine Cat Tow. We have the Marine Cat Dragon. There's a lot of redundancy between the infantry groups. Depending on which 2 specializations you picked, you may have a whole bunch of overlap. So how do you choose which one you want? Well, there's some key stats to look at. Number 1, how many men are in the unit? A larger unit can defend itself more easily. Also, how many of the actual weapon do they have? If you're bringing these guys along to kill tanks, you want something ideally that has multiple tank-killing weapons in it and a lot of ammo for it. So when we look at this dragon, we see that it has 8 shots, and there's 2 of them, so that's not bad, plus 8 men in the unit. They're not airdroppable if you are doing paradrops. Now, one thing to note is that the dragon shoots directly at the vehicle, but a javelin hits the vehicle from above where the armor is much weaker. So I actually like the javelin more than the dragon, but it's, again, a matter of preference on your part. You can compare, say, the cat dragons or the cat javelins with some of the other options. You have the Marines with cat javelins. The Marines also have cat tows. The airborne squad, they have their own tow squad. Let's look at theirs. It's got half as many men. They don't have an LMG, but it is a little cheaper. Another thing to consider when you're deciding which one to grab is if they have a better transport available, you may simply want to grab it because of a superior transport. In this case, we've already got them all covered, but in some cases, you may not, and you may just say, hey, you know, this other infantry unit might be a little bit better, but I'm going to take this one because it has this really good transport. There's also the weapon squad. Of all of these, I would actually go with weapon squad because it gets the javelin, it hits from above, it has 8 men in the unit, 6 rifles. They can defend themselves against pretty much anything. So I'm going to go ahead and slot in a couple of weapon squads. And there you go. You probably don't need 4, but there you have it. As long as you have an anti-air, an anti-tank, and then an anti-infantry, these are like your 3 core things. And then this elite unit is also anti-everything really, but anti-infantry primarily. So that is the basis to cover for me. I need anti-infantry, anti-air, anti-tank. Now, if you have a little bit of leftover room in the budget, you could bring along some other specialty units that are not really super necessary, like this machine gun team, for example. And don't be afraid to just send them in on foot if you need to save space in the budget. Where's this weapon squad? If I want to clear up some room in my budget, I'll just tell them, yeah, you're on foot, because they can always just use one of these other vehicles. And where is it? Here we go. Machine gun team. We'll just say I want to bring a machine gun team on foot. Thank you. Or there's also a grenade launcher team. You know, hey, what if you want to bring a grenade launcher team? Why not? You can grab one of those, send them in on foot. Don't actually deploy them on foot once you get in game, but here on the deck builder screen, you're just choosing on foot to save money in the budget. So there you go. This covers your main bases of primary infantry, and elite infantry if you have it available, anti-air, anti-tank. And then the other stuff beyond that, this is just personal preference, luxury picks, if you will. If you have excess budget and you want to bring along something shiny, go wild, pick something that looks fun. So that's what these are. Now, let's get into vehicles. Vehicles are probably the simplest section to cover. You want to look at the armor of your vehicles is kind of a huge indicator of how strong it actually is. 700 armor on the front, 100 on the sides and rear. This is a proper tank. I'm immediately just taking a couple of those. But not just the armor, even more importantly, is the protection system. The trophy protection system for the US, or the arena protection system for Russia. The Iron Fist protection system is another alternative. These protection systems will defeat incoming missiles by causing them to explode prematurely. And you can see it represented by this icon up here that has a little ×4 indicator. This means that this tank can absorb 4 missiles and take no damage. Considering how strong some of the missiles are in this game that could like almost one-shot the tank, this is a tremendous increase to your survivability, and I immediately prioritize vehicles with a protection system on it above all others. Basically, in every deck, regardless of specialization or anything else, protection system rules all. So I would grab immediately 2 of these guys and put the trophy system on them. Now, there is a cooldown on the trophy system. It can only go off once every 5 seconds. So if you get hit by 2 missiles back to back, one of them will get through. That's another reason why you want weapon teams that can destroy tanks that have multiple weapons. Remember that we picked this weapon squad with 2 javelins. If both of these javelins lock on and fire, one of them's getting through because the protection system's only going to block 1. But the protection system will still keep the tank alive long enough to pop their smoke canister and run away, and that's super important. So we've got the tank. There's another tank here. We can look at this one. We see that it has high armor, but when we go down and look at the protection system, it has a jammer. It has a jammer, but it doesn't have an active protection system. That's the terminology you want to look for, is active protection. That's the one that blocks missiles. So this tank would be all right in a pinch if you needed it, but I would highly prioritize the other tank. So your bases you need to cover under the vehicle category will vary quite a bit. It'll be very different depending on which specialty you pick. So I can't give you an exact rundown of what sort of vehicles you always want to bring, but if you have the option to bring a heavy tank with a protection system, that's always top priority. I would actually prefer taking a smaller tank with a protection system like the M8 AGS, which can upgrade to the M8 Thunderbolt if you go down here to the package. M8 Thunderbolt, here we see it, Iron Fist APS, that's active protection system. We want this, right? So I am immediately slotting in a couple of these guys. Even though it has less armor than this other tank, I still want it instead because I value the protection system to keep me alive more than I actually value raw armor on the vehicle to stop incoming missiles. And this is true also of all the Russian tanks. Like the name of the tank, I'm trying not to be too specific with the names of the tanks here. I just want to drill home how important protection system is. If you have a tank that has a protection system and one that doesn't, take the one that does and put the upgrade on it. I would rather have 2 tanks with a protection system than 4 tanks without it. Now, in the vehicle category, you've also got some lighter, faster vehicles, and it's a good idea to grab a couple of these. Just because flanking plays can be big, if you see an enemy anti-air unit or an enemy artillery piece that's off by itself off to the side, even a humble little Humvee flanking around to the side can really mess up the enemy's day if it manages to get over there quickly enough and blow it up. So grab a couple of quick moving vehicles if you have the budget for it. Grab trophy system tanks if you have the budget for it. You can also get the protection system, believe it or not, on some troop transports. I don't believe any of these have it available in this particular specialty, but depending on the group you pick, go through your transports and look. Some of them get it. Notoriously, the Boomerang and the T-15 for Russia, both of which are Russian, they get protection systems on them. And I think there was one other. No, it's not here. I don't recall the name off the top of my head. I'm sorry. But do double check. If you can get protection systems on troop transports, that guarantees that your guys are going to get off of the vehicle and into combat without getting blown up on the way there, which is always nice. Now, for what I consider the most important category, the support category, 1500 to me is like a minimum. I would actually like it a little higher. If I had to play a deck with only 1000 or 1250 in it, I could make it work, but it's not as good. You want a lot of money in your support budget, and I'm going to show you why. It's because there are so many different roles in the support category you need to cover. You need supply trucks, you need short-range anti-air, you need long-range anti-air and missile defense, you need artillery. I like to bring along a mortar launcher, I like to bring a large supply truck, and as you can tell, all these different things I'm listing, you got to pay for them all. So first things first, I like to grab a basic supply truck. I like to grab one that carries around 4K-ish is kind of the sweet spot. I think 2K is too little. Some supply trucks also carry passengers, keep in mind, so this doubles as a troop transport if you need it to. So I'm just going to go ahead and slap a couple of those in there. If you have a if you have a deck with a lot of helicopters available, transport choppers, then you need less vehicles in the support category because your logistics can be handled by helicopters. But I'm just going to go ahead and grab 2 of these. And then I'm going to look for short-range air defense, which is primarily for dealing with helicopters. The SHORAD is a nickname for that, but not every air defense is called SHORAD. Some of them have other names. In this case, we're going to go with the Avenger because I think it's the only option we actually have between these 2 battle groups. As you can see, this thing can target planes, but its range is not long enough to reliably be able to snipe planes. You're primarily going to be rolling this thing towards enemy helicopters. And of course, I'm upgrading it because helicopters are super oppressive. If you don't have a way to shoot them down, they just chase you around and harass you. So immediately slotting in a couple of anti-air. Now, on that same note, planes and long-range missiles both are usually shot down by the same kind of vehicle, which is anything that has a radar defense system usually can shoot down missiles, but you can always mouse over down here if you're not sure and double check. You see the slam ram is able to shoot down both missiles and aircraft. So I'm immediately grabbing these because I don't see any other options here. You can kind of like, if you're not sure, just click each of them and look over here at the description and see which ones say surface to air missiles, right? It's just the Avenger and the slam ram. So I'm bringing the Avenger to deal specifically with choppers, and I'm bringing the Slam Ram to deal with jets and incoming missiles, and I'm probably keeping these 2 somewhat close to each other because I don't want a chopper coming and killing my Slam Ram, nor do I want a jet coming and killing my Avenger. So it's a good idea to keep them paired somewhat close together. Important stats to consider for your missile defense is reload time and total amount of ammo that you carry, because if the enemy fires a bunch of missiles and runs you out of ammo or catches you in a reload, you'll die or you'll lose a vehicle. So I like to upgrade these to give them more ammo capacity or more barrels or more whatever. It's worth upgrading your missile defense systems so you don't get absolutely destroyed by cruise missiles. Now, once you have those, the next very important role to cover is anything that can bombard your opponent from long range. That can be artillery, or it can be an MLRS, which is basically just rocket artillery. So when you go through your vehicles and look at your options, you want to look for anything that's listed as artillery or MLRS. We have 2 artillery pieces right here. As I go through the rest of these, I don't see any more. So we're going to go ahead and compare these 2. The stats to look for when you're selecting an artillery piece, generally speaking, range is kind of important. This one reaches 32. This one reaches 38. Some of them can get extended range if you put upgrades on them, but as a general rule of thumb, range is good for artillery. Damage, you can compare the numbers and find the one that you like the most. I personally love cluster bombs. Cluster bombs are great because they hit a wider AoE, and artillery is not the most accurate thing unless you do guided rounds, but we'll get to that in a second. Most of the time, any non-guided artillery is not super accurate, so having cluster bombs to make sure it hits a wide area is a really effective way to make sure you hit your target. So I would stock up on some artillery pieces. If you don't have artillery in your deck, you're gonna struggle. It's rough because the opponent will be just constantly bombarding you from out of reach with their own artillery, and you don't have any way to hit them back easily. You can try to flank around, you can try to paradrop on it, you can try to airstrike it, but the most effective counter to artillery is your own artillery. When they start bombing you or bombarding you with their artillery, you just pick your own artillery piece and you point right back at the same spot. It's called a counter battery. and that means you're just bombarding them, or counter bombardment. Guided rounds can also be pretty effective on any kind of artillery piece that offers guided, laser guided. You can tell if it's laser guided just by looking at the icon. You'll see this little laser here. And what this means is if any of your recon guys are in position to point a laser at the target, it will home in and become very accurate. I've seen some hilarious stunts with this, like shooting choppers out of the air. I've seen bullets curving around in circles like it's Wanted, the movie. So laser guided munitions are fun if you are able to get good recon in position, but if you don't want to fiddle around too much with the laser guidance, cluster bombs are the other, like the very noob friendly, no brain option of just blow up the whole area. And we love blowing up the whole area. So that's it for your main, most important roles. Your logistics, your chopper defense, your missile defense, and long-range artillery. There is a few other roles to consider that are more optional, more luxury, but for me, I like having a large transport if possible. So like a huge truck that carries 15 tons, I would take one of these sometimes. I also like having a mobile mortar system because these guys can lay down smoke cover. They're very mobile, they're very quick, you can get them around the map quickly. And having smoke cover for your infantry and vehicles to either get in position when attacking or to retreat from a losing situation, smoke can save the day. Some artillery pieces can load in smoke, but I noticed that the Brutus does not actually have smoke available, so I would bring my own personal, a portable mortar to cover that. If you toggle here and you see multiple ammo types listed on an artillery piece, then you know it probably has smoke as well as explosives, but neither of these do. Again, the type of artillery you have will be different depending on your specializations that you chose. So if you happen to get an artillery piece that can deploy smoke on its own, you might not really need the mortar. And that's about it for stuff that I would call a necessity. If you have room left over in the budget, you can always grab something else if you want it, just as a matter of personal preference. You can grab a Miklik for some close range mortar fun. You could grab an extra air defense. Oh, I actually missed this guy. There's another air defense here. You could grab some of these in case your Avengers get blown up, have another option. So we'll just go ahead and throw those in there for now. But that's it. You want logistics, chopper defense, missile and aircraft defense, artillery. That's your main roles. You got to cover those. And then optionally, mortars, more logistics. This is all personal preference, but these are a necessity. That'll cover you on support. Helicopters. Okay. Helicopters is honestly the hardest section to give advice on because all of the helicopters are there's a lot of flexible builds and what you can do with choppers. You can set them up to fight other choppers, you can set them up to harass ground troops, you can use them for transport, and I don't consider any of those to be super necessary to the game, but they're all very helpful. So because of this, personal preference comes into play more with helicopters than with any other category. If I had to just pick the most important roles to cover, though, it would be anti-tank and transport. I am a big believer in chopper transport. I always love having chopper transport in basically every deck that I play so that you can get your infantry out to remote locations quickly and get them deposited much faster than you could do that with the ground transport. Deploying your troops quickly makes or breaks the game in many cases, especially if you get there first and you drop off an anti-air infantry. Now the enemy comes in a second later with their own chopper, but you've already beat them to the punch and you have anti-air on the ground. You shoot down their chopper, GG. Or you could stick an anti-air and an anti-tank crew in the same chopper, fly it out there, and then whether the enemy shows up in a vehicle or in a chopper, because you got there first, you shoot them down. So speed is of the essence. The other thing, though, is anti-tank. If an opponent is pushing you with a bunch of heavy tanks, you need some way to stop it, obviously. And one of the most reliable ways to do that safely is artillery and helicopters. So I personally will prioritize a good anti-tank guided missile chopper above all else. I know from looking at this list from practice that the longbow is probably the best choice for that. You may have to go through it, but I'll show you what to look for. If you're playing a different specialty, you'll have different chopper names and you're going to sit here clicking through them, but here's what you're looking for. This little missile hitting the top of a tank icon indicates an anti-tank missile that hits on the top of the target. The longbow has 16 of these Hellfire missiles, so I would immediately just slot in 2 of these guys right away, no questions asked, to help counter enemy vehicle pushes. You can also pick up some anti-air, like air-to-air choppers if you want to. I don't consider that super necessary, but it is a possibility. You can take a chopper and stick some Sidewinder missiles on there, and you can use it to fend off enemy choppers. But realistically, I think it's better to let your ground forces with anti-air deal with enemy choppers. But if you don't have any ground forces available nearby and you need a fast response, an air-to-air chopper is not a bad thing to include in the deck. I don't really consider it a necessity, though. I would definitely get a tank buster as one of your choppers, and then I would get a couple of transports. I am a big believer in the Osprey just because of its movement speed. This thing seats 28 people, it carries 6 tons, and it moves at 500 speed. That's really nice all-around stats. The King Stallion, another great option. This thing carries 16 tons and 30 men. So it's only 2 more guys than the Osprey, but it's significantly more cargo space for making supply drops to the front line. The downside, the King Stallion's a lot slower, so I would use the Stallion for big supply drops, whereas I would use the Osprey for quickly dropping off men. And again, whatever deck you're playing, you're going to have different choppers to look at, different names, so just make sure you look at these stats for your transports. How much does it carry? How many men does it seat? How fast does it move? These are important stats to look at and compare and take the one you want. So with my Tank Buster squared away, and with a couple of transport choppers squared away, what else do I want? Well, like we said, you could grab an air-to-air chopper. Since we have so much room in our budget, I'll go ahead and grab some air-to-air choppers. I also like a cheap chopper is always good to have, especially the ones that can be upgraded with an optronic system. An optronic system gives you a significantly higher vision range, and this actually is kind of like having another recon unit on the field. The Kiowa Warrior also has a laser on it as well. So if you happen to have any kind of small chopper like this that you can upgrade for vision or laser guidance, it's like having an aerial spy. So I'm absolutely taking a couple of these and probably giving them a missile to defend themselves against other choppers that might come chase them around, or Hydra rockets. These are an amazing all-purpose harassment tool for ground units, whether it's infantry or vehicles. This isn't going to one-shot tanks or infantry, but it can chase them off pretty effectively. So we'll give it some light weaponry, and there you go. You've got a relatively cheap multi-purpose chopper with eyes in the sky, so that's another way to set it up. There are some choppers with really high stealth scores. I don't think I have any in this particular battle group. Just checking. No. If you find a chopper with a high stealth score, that's another thing to consider. Sometimes you can get a sneaky helicopter in on your opponent's backline and land there and get some vision behind enemy lines. So there you go. That's all set. And then we come to the final category, which is aircraft. Aircraft has 2 or 3 major roles that you want to cover. The first and foremost is always going to be an air superiority fighter, or an ASF. This simply means your plane that beats up the enemy planes. For me personally, I like to prioritize an affordable ASF, and I think the most important stats to look at are movement speed and agility, or turn radius. A plane that moves quickly and turns quickly can get in position to get the shots off very quickly. From this group of planes, I'm going to go ahead and pick an F-15C. In your group of planes, depending on the battle group that you're playing, you might have to do some comparison, but try to find a fast plane with a low number on the turning circle. The lower this number, the better. That means it can turn quickly, and the higher the speed number, the better. It means you're fast. You also want to look for ECM, electronic countermeasures. This is the percentage chance that you will randomly screw with your opponent's targeting systems and just cause their missiles to miss. And if you're about to get hit, you also have decoy flares. These are 2 gadgets that can keep your plane alive in a dogfight. So any plane that has higher percentages on its ECMs and high numbers of flares to deploy, these are great ways to get an enemy off your tail in the middle of a dogfight. As far as armaments are concerned, both Russia and the US have 3 different missile ranges. You're going to have a 7K range missile. You're going to have a 2K range missile that can hit helicopters. And if this plane gets it, there's also a mid-range missile. And some of them also have a long-range missile, but I don't know if we have one available here. Oh, here it is, the Gunslinger, a 9K range missile. So it's, again, a matter of personal preference as to whether you want a cheaper plane or a more expensive plane with all the bells and whistles. If you can get the 9K range missiles on your plane, that's always a plus for an ASF. The standard is going to be the 7K missiles that come available on basically every fighter plane. And if you want them to be able to target choppers easily, the short range missile is handy. The machine gun will do the trick, but you know, a Sidewinder is never a bad thing to have. So I'm going to go ahead and take the F-15C Eagle, because this thing has Sidewinders and AMRAAMs and Sparrows. That's 5K, 7K, and 2K distance. So this thing can shoot down at any given range. It's fast, it's agile, and it's not all that expensive either. And we're going to go ahead and slap a couple of these into the deck. So that's your first roll. Make sure you get a plane that can win a shootout with enemy planes. Look at flares, look at ECMs. You could go for a more expensive plane with a higher ECM value. I tend to just take a cheaper plane and deploy more of them. That's, you know, safety in numbers and all that. 2 planes will win against 1 almost 100% of the time. But you could, you know, choose to, you know, bring out one of the big expensive planes as well. Some of them can actually upgrade their ECM with add-ons that you can find on them. If you look through the upgrades menu, I don't know which of these would have it offhand, but as you're going through your equipment upgrades, sometimes you can get additional percentage on your ECM, and that's fantastic. It makes it harder to hit. So we've got our ASF. Second roll is anything that can strike the ground strike. That could be a bomber, or it could be a cruise missile, or it mainly just that, bomber or cruise missile, or direct attack missiles like a Maverick, that sort of thing. I'm gonna throw a Lancer up here just for comparison's sake, because this thing is a massive bomber plane. You can even put the almighty tactical nuke on here if you really want to meme and kind of troll the game a little bit by wasting 1,000 supply on something you can only use once. But hey, if your opponent is silly enough to put all their units in one spot, you know, it's hard to beat a nuke. 24 cruise missiles. So here we go, a cruise missile. These things have really, really long range. So these are a great option, but they will be intercepted by enemy missile defense. So they're not the most reliable thing. We're going to cover another topic in a second on how to get by that, but make sure once you have your ASF, you have something that can bomb the ground effectively. I prefer speed as a top stat for something that is going to be making bombing runs. So anything that is going in for a bombing run, grab a fast plane if you are using a bomb that needs to be dropped straight down. You can tell how the bomb drops by reading the descriptions of them over here. I'm going to choose a JDAM. If it just says bomb, what this means is you fly over the target and drop it on their head. Because you have to fly over them, it's important to have a fast and maneuverable plane to do this. However, if you're using something like the cruise missile, which flies 10,000 meters ahead, speed is no longer that important because you're not going anywhere near the opponent, so it doesn't matter. So, personal preference, pick a bomber you like. If it's going to be a cruise missile type, a slower plane is fine. If it's going to be a bomb type that drops directly on their head, you want a faster plane, I'll just go ahead and slap a couple of F-18s into this deck for my bomber with a JDAM. And I'm also leaving the Slam ER, which is... Oh, this is a cruise missile, actually. So this plane has both. There you go. I have a plane with both a cruise missile and a regular bomb, so it can harass the enemy from far away, or it can fly right over their heads and drop this thing that can't be intercepted. That's the important part. It also has Sidewinders and AMRAAMs to defend itself, so this is a pretty well-rounded plane. Now, let's talk about SEED. What is SEED? It stands for Suppression of Enemy Air Defenses. SEED is anything that specifically seeks out and destroys enemy anti-air. And very specifically, we have a couple of planes that are very good at it. But what you're looking for is this. A missile that says anti-radiation. Anti-radiation means that it's going to target anything that has a radar on the enemy team as long as they have the radar turned on. So their missile defense systems, this will actually go after their missile defense systems, and they usually have really long range. A couple of these being fired at the same time can overwhelm a missile defense system and take it out. And once their missile defense system is down, that's when you go in for the kill with your nuke or with your cruise missile or whatever else you're trying to approach with. These kind of missiles are most effective when fired in large volumes, so it's a good idea to coordinate with your team and have everybody send a seed, or 2 or 3 seeds all at once. Going out is the way to do it. There's a fantastic plane for this for the US called the Prowler, which gets four of these seed missiles at quite a long range. So this is an option as well. I'm going to go ahead and slap in 2 of those guys. So if there's a really critical target on the enemy team, you can overwhelm their air defenses with some seed and then send in your bomber with a cruise missile and take it out. Or, you know, if you don't want to use a bomber, you could, you know, go in and just style on your opponent with a freaking nuke. And there you go. Like seed then nuke, or seed then cruise missile. But anytime you hear seed, it means anti-radiation missiles. If you see anyone in game saying we need seed, they're saying deploy your plane with the anti-radiation missile. So that's it. Oh, there is one other category that I didn't really cover, which is transport planes. These are only really relevant if you are doing airdropping or paratrooping onto the enemy. The most important stat here, aside from how many people does it seat and how much does it carry, is actually the turn circle, believe it or not. Because some of these bigger planes take forever to turn around and they're not very maneuverable, and you can end up accidentally steering them into a terrible spot because, you know, you couldn't maneuver properly to get to the drop zone. So I actually look for the lowest turning circle on my transport planes. I like the Hercules for this, and the Harvest Hawk it's basically the same plane. So depending on which transport planes you're looking at, I realize the Globemaster carries way more and that it seats more people, but this thing is it's a flying boat. It doesn't turn around very easily, and you can end up just losing it for stupid reasons. And like an enemy fighter jet is coming at you, and this thing's just, it's too slow to get this giant freaking bathtub out of the way, and then you lose everything on board. So to avoid that, I like a faster, quicker turning plane. That's it. That is how to build an effective deck that covers your bases. Just as a quick recap, you're looking for high stealth. You're looking for assault recon, which is still reasonably high stealth, but able to defend themselves. Drones when you can. Light vehicles with any leftover room you have in the budget. Main infantry for fighting enemy infantry. Anti-air, anti-vehicle. Then whatever kind of personal preference you want, or elite infantry if you have it available. Remember that the transports are shared between these. Tanks, active protection system is everything. Grab active protection, even if it means taking a smaller tank. You always want that. Support category, you're looking for logistics trucks. You're looking for anti-chopper. You're looking for anti-missile and anti-air. You're looking for artillery. And then the rest of this stuff is personal preference. Helicopters, you're looking for a tank buster. You're looking for a transport, and then personal preference on basically the rest of them. And then for aircraft, finally, you need an ASF, a fighter jet that wins fights. You're looking for seed, and you're looking for bombers or transports. Those are the roles you're trying to fill. You may not always need to run a bomber. You may not always need to run a transport, so there is a fair amount of personal preference that goes into this. When I get to this point where I've selected the loadout of the units that I want, and I still have 150 bucks to spend, I would go through just looking for guys that could use an upgrade, or vehicles that could use an upgrade. Anything here, like, oh, say this Humvee, you want, here, have a smoke canister. Maybe that'll help save your life when you get in trouble. Force Recon, they're already upgraded. I think most of these units are already upgraded because I've used them before in other decks. But yeah, if you end up with extra room in the budget, go through and just look and see if there's any of them that you can slap some upgrades on that are meaningful. Extra ammo, extra armor, stuff like that. That's it. That's all I got. I hope this was helpful for you, and I hope that the decks that you build serve you well, and I'll see you all on the battlefield. Thank you all for watching. And for those who've been asking for a copy of the decks that I'm using, they're included down below in the video description, along with a link to my Twitch for those who would like to watch along while I'm playing. Have a great day. See you all next time.